Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men, and on this show, we will hear real-life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. Hello, this is another episode of Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? I'm Brandon Archer, and holy shit, are you in for it today? This guest was an interesting ask. I reached out and I'm like, what do you think? It took a bit to get an answer, and I respect that because you've probably read the title of this show by now if you're listening, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Why would he do that? And the reason is I think there's value in hearing a woman's perspective of how a man showed up in a time in his life where he was very unsure about a hell of a lot of things. So, welcome, Sue Ross. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Brandon. Nice to see you in this virtual space.
Yeah.
I'm doing really well.
Yeah. Usually I ask people to say who they are and where they are, so we might as well just jump through that. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do?
So I live in BC in the Okanagan, and I am a trusted advisor for organizations and entrepreneurs who are looking to self-actualize either in their businesses or in their personal lives. Yeah.
Do you remember how we met?
I do. We were at a local brewery patio, and I was sitting with my cousin trying to get some work done, but there was a guy across the way sitting with a friend of his, and I remember just looking over from time to time at this person who seemed to be looking over at me as well.
So you weren't swooning? What?
Yeah, no, I wasn't swooning, but I was definitely telling my cousin, hey, I think that guy's checking me out.
Yeah, I was. And interestingly enough, that was 8 years ago, less than a week ago. Because that's in my calendar. That was an impactful day for me for reasons we may or may not get into. Because, what was it, less than 2 weeks previous, I'd had my heart attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was an interesting tidbit of information that I learned, I think, shortly after. It might have been on our first actual date, potentially. Yeah.
Could have been, because I tried to pull the plug because I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like, I got a heart attack to deal with.
Well, and on my end as well, it was a tumultuous time because I believe only a few months prior, I'd had taken an extended leave of absence from my work to manage a significant period of stress. So I was not working, and I was healing myself and my own mental health at that time as well.
Yeah, pretty wild. We chatted just very briefly before we hit record, and neither of us know what to expect, and I fucking love that. But that time period in both our lives where we were like, pause. Super fascinating when two people have that space in their life. Because that's not, you don't hear that a lot. For me, like, took quite a pause to go, what the fuck is going on here? And I think, well, obviously it played a part in our relationship.
I would agree with that.
Well, it created a space that's not, air quotes, normal.
Yeah. I think that we filled a gap for each other. We filled a need for each other at the time that we were both going through in our personal lives. It definitely, I think it gave us both some sense of security and peace of mind when every other aspect of our life was built on shaky ground. At least that I'm saying that from my perspective. I wasn't looking for anybody at the time.
Yeah, I suppose I wasn't either, if I'm honest with myself. So I mean, why I asked you it on here, I don't think I said it already, is because I thought it would be valuable for people to hear, men and women, of a woman's perspective of a man's behavior, actions, how he showed up, and have the guy in the same fucking room 8 years later and have worked on himself and just try to help people understand my perspective to that behavior. I do understand a lot of my behavior now. I didn't at the time. I was just clueless. I was just on autopilot going through the motions. So, what does this discussion look like? Not sure, other than start with a question.
I like questions.
Yeah. What was the most difficult thing being in a relationship with me?
That's well, just don't beat around the bush, eh? Get right into the tough
Have
questions.
you not listened to the
I think,
podcast?
well, you weren't wrong. Let's say that. What was the most difficult thing about being in a relationship with you?
Yes.
I think where I felt the most challenged was in navigating or not but in your emotional landscape. I felt was a little bit of a roller coaster at times.
Yeah, it was a hot fucking mess. Yeah, I can own that. I can own that now. I do remember you bringing it up too. I do remember you trying to address it. How did I respond to that?
How did you respond to it?
How did I respond to you trying to tell me that that's an issue?
I would say at times there were moments where you would take ownership for finding yourself responding in a way that might have not been the way that you wanted to show up. I think that was something that I did appreciate about you. And at other times, I think that both we're obviously both strong-willed individuals. And so what I experienced was both of us needing to be heard and having our feelings validated and what that so when I would bring challenges to you, maybe at times there was a lack of truly listening to what I was saying because of the opinions and the feelings that you were holding to be true, which are valid as well. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Looking back, it's so clear what was happening internally for me. Now I can see it. At the time, I just had no fucking clue. Like, in my opinion, and where I'm at now, defense, responding in a defensive way or not hearing just means there's something going on inside me. And that was not wisdom I had at the time.
Mhm.
Um, what did that experience teach you about men in general?
I don't know that I feel like a lot of times, I mean, we all deal with emotional information in different ways, right? And I think it reaffirmed for me how a lot of us are not brought up with with the tools that we need to manage our emotions. And so I don't think it's a generalization just about men. I do think that women are also guilty of this. Absolutely. However, again, if I'm stereotyping and whatnot, men do typically, as we all know, the research is out there, right? Men are brought up saying that they're not allowed to cry, they're not allowed to feel, they're not allowed to have these emotions. And so the experiences that I had in our relationship together, I would say validated those stereotypes at the time.
Meaning what? Meaning I didn't think I was stereotypical. I thought I was emotional
Well,
fucking
you
wreck.
are you are emotional, actually. It's funny, which is actually which is a good, I think, a good quality for a man to have. But what you do with those emotions, it's the management of the emotions, I think, that were more stereotypical, because I would say that men are on a spectrum in terms of how they emote. You are a more emotional individual, but what we do to hold space, like to process those emotions, that's what I felt was stereotypical.
Mm.
it was the healthy outlet or the healthy expression of the emotions that um, taught me about men.
You said something to me that I will carry for the rest of my life. And I shared it with you a few months ago, and you're like, I'm sorry I said that. And I'm like, no. And it was, I need Brandon the man, not Brandon the boy.
And it's funny, I don't remember saying that now. I know, which is the same type of response I probably gave you a few months ago when you shared that with me. And I can
But
see that that affects you still a lot.
it does, but it was something I needed to hear. It was probably hurtful at the time, but I would say I had a higher knowing that, fuck, she's right.
Mm,
Not understanding what it meant at the time.
right,
And what I've landed on all these years later is that emotional capacity to manage my own, to navigate my own. Because yeah, I think emotions in a man is strong. It's just what you do with it. And I was at a boy level of being able to navigate it, which was fucking zero, to now far from perfect, but I like to think I don't let it control my behavior like it used to.
right, right. And I'm trying to think back. I'm trying to think back around what was going on for me
Mm,
that might have triggered a comment like that, a statement like that. And going back to that idea of you being a more emotionally expressive individual, I remember feeling so something that I have been working on for a lot of years is this feeling of I don't feeling needed in a overly needy way. I remember saying that to you a lot in our conversations. And don't get me wrong, I love being needed. Obviously, I've got children and I love helping my community. And I love it when people ask me for help because it allows me to reciprocate. These are all wonderful things. But I remember feeling too needed a lot in our relationship where I was, I was at a time of my life where um, I was still very much working to rebuild my own life and my own mental health while being a parent, while trying to go back to work full time and build a business on the side as well. And that is likely where that comment came from, but I don't remember. It's been so long,
well,
so.
the way I experienced it is it was very heartfelt. It was very like your soul trying to talk to my soul. I didn't take it like you're giving me shit. I felt it. Like, you
Mm,
delivered it in a quite a soft way, which was fantastic. But what you're talking about, feeling too needed. I mean, I've seen it in clients that in men that are more on the more emotional end of the spectrum, if it is a spectrum. And I now so clearly see it was that little boy and mom dynamic. I feel it so clearly. I was subconsciously looking to you to help me hold my emotions.
right.
And it's only, I don't know when it was. I don't remember the day or anything, but when I realized nobody's coming to save me is when I accelerated into this version of me. I'm like, motherfucker,
Mm,
I'm looking to women to help me hold my emotions. Childhood trauma, relationship with my mom, blah, blah, blah. That's where it comes from. It's kind of irrelevant when you're in a relationship. Like, I was trying to get you to fill something for me that was
mm,
not your responsibility. But I had no fucking clue. I'm just like, I was just a hot mess. I don't know how else to put it. So I appreciate the patience you did show, because I will say you were able to communicate with me quite well on your experience. I just couldn't hear you,
right.
which I think
Do
is
you have
pretty
any
common.
regrets in our relationship?
Yeah.
Care to share?
There should have been more sex,
Oh, okay.
but that I actually own that because of my energy and how I showed up.
Right.
Again, that little boy thing. I was like waiting versus just stepping in and kind of declaring what I wanted or energetically expressing what I wanted.
Right. And like many women, a lot of my desire is tied to emotional connection, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I'm like, fucking, you don't know where I'm at, like, can you connect with that and feel safe with that? I get it. I fully understand it and fully own it now. And, what I strive for now, I am still emotional. I don't think it affects my behavior as much, but I can express, hey, I'm feeling this way right now.
Hmm.
And I'm really trying to just be steadier, consistent how I show up. It's like, he said he's like, not depressed. I don't really get depressed, but like better,
Hmm.
feeling anxious, but he's still, that's what I'm aiming for now. And that's for me, that's not for anybody I'm with. So I can understand how, from your perspective, like, you can't trust that. You can't trust a guy who's like all over the fucking place. Or it's not that I can't have emotions. It's just like, are they in check?
Yeah, and I don't think that 100% of the time is ever the goal, right? I
Agreed.
think that we need to get it right for ourselves and for our partners most of the time. But there are going to be, there are going to be those oddball times that just
Yeah.
those feelings and those emotions are get the better of us. Yeah. But I have noticed, obviously we've stayed friends, um, or friendly, let's say, over the years. As you've navigated new relationships, I have seen that. I've seen that into practice, what you're saying right
Mm,
now. I've seen that evolution in how you manage your
mm.
emotions.
Thank
And
you.
even in our own interactions too. Do you remember how every once in a while we'd get together for a drink or a visit or a coffee or whatever, and we just end up fighting or bickering at each other constantly? And I feel like that was the first 5 years after our breakup. Probably. I haven't been keeping track, but I'm just throwing out that number, 5 years. But really, the last few interactions we've had, handful of interactions over the past few years, have felt lighter to me.
Yeah, agreed. I remember one time, because we live relatively close to each other, we were walking back, and I do not remember what happened, but I just kind of stayed quiet. And all of a sudden you said, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And, from my perspective, I was at a place where I said whatever I said. I don't remember the conversation. And it was my opinion. It wasn't fact, and it triggered you. That's okay. And instead of me like to convince you of my point, I just was quiet.
Mm,
And I don't know what internal process went on for you, but obviously you had enough time to just like come down from the emotion and look at what just happened. And I super appreciated that. It was like, huh, that was cool. Do
yeah, I do remember that.
you remember what it was?
I don't
Yeah.
remember what the conversation was about, but I do remember the silence, and feel like that space just really helps a person, both parties, reflect on what's being said. Yeah, that silence is powerful,
Yeah. Not something I've always been able to do.
myself included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you asked if I had any regrets. Do you have any regrets?
I actually don't, because I look back on the time we had together in a more positive light than maybe you think. I don't know. I think that we came into each other's lives at like we've agreed, at a very, very interesting time. We were both navigating our own challenges, and you were the first person that I have ever dated prior to my existing relationship, that took an interest in me, and like in things that I was interested in. And I feel like you reflected back to me at times, things that I needed to see about myself, positive things that I needed to see about myself. And at the same time, you reflected back to me things that I didn't love about myself, which
Mm.
I was also needing to heal, right? So I think that we were definitely mirrors for each other, both in positive and um, growth oriented ways. And and I'm just grateful for that time that we had together, despite how fraught it was at times, and how we just felt so irked by each other a lot.
I think it's funny.
It's funny now in retrospect. How long have
Oh
we
my
been
God.
best?
The trip to California, motherfucker.
That was probably the worst.
So that was an internal battle for me, like real internal battle of push pull of my wounding showing up. And I understand it now. I didn't understand it at the time. I'm like, I think I want you here, but I don't want you here. I think I want you here, and I don't want you here. I never told you there. I don't know where we were,
Hmm.
but the thought going through my head is I'm gonna fucking get her to the airport and she can fucking fly home.
That yeah, I had similar feelings for sure. I felt that I would just drive home because
Yeah,
and leave you to find your own way home
yeah.
because
It's
there were
it
moments that were
it makes me
challenging.
sad. It makes me sad, not regretful, but sad because that trip you would kind of like was a bit of an olive branch from you to me, and I knew that, and I appreciated it, but I also internally pushed it away. I
Hmm.
wasn't able to connect the way either of us deserved or wanted. I just couldn't do it. It was like, we're getting close, we're connecting, and I would push away
Hmm.
through, I mean, oh my God. I remember, holy fuck, I was a dick. Like, will own, that was a bad, there was not good behavior from me coming on that trip towards you many times. And I apologize for that because you did not deserve that. And I remember you one place, Airbnb or whatever had just happened, and you're like, I don't deserve that, or I don't deserve to be talked like that. And that sticks with me too, because you were right. You were right. And I didn't have the capacity or the awareness to even realize how I was about to show up. I was just in defense mode, like
Hmm.
keep you at arm's length so that I don't get hurt. And that would mean I hurt you. Not consciously, but definitely going to make up my own term right here. It was a subconscious intent. Keep her over there, keep her small, keep her feeling weak so that I don't have to deal with this difficult conversation. And that kind of
Right.
sucks that I did that to you.
It hurt at the time. It absolutely did. For context for the listeners, though, I think it's helpful to know that we had already broken up before
Yeah.
we decided to go on this trip. And you had recently moved out because we lived together for just a short 6 months before we realized it was not, or really, I realized it was a little bit too soon. And and that was at the end of the summer that you had moved out of my place, and there was this looming trip in the fall. We had, well, you had asked me to, and we both agreed that we could just put things aside. So, in retrospect, I think going on that trip at all was probably not in either of our best interests, but it was a learning experience for sure.
All the time.
Yeah. At least I got to see some olive trees for the first time, so that was exciting.
That's true.
I remember that.
And Portland. Portland was cool. That's the first
Portland,
time I'd
and the
been
best
there.
beer the best saison I've ever had was
Oh
in
yeah.
Portland.
At the shoots. At the
Yeah.
shoots or one
No,
of
no,
those
at Gigantic Brewing.
gigantic. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
was a champignon saison.
My God.
Yeah,
At that like industrial area, I think so,
yeah,
right? With the food trucks, and then there was like these like
yeah.
that was the coolest thing. Yeah, that was cool.
Hmm.
Interesting.
So I try and remember the positive aspects of that particular trip.
I there was
Those
many
stand out
highlights for
more.
me. There was very
Yeah.
I had a overall I had a good time. It's just yeah. wasn't best Brandon showing up. That was little boy Brandon showing up for sure. So thank you for still talking to me all these years later after the way I
You should
treated
show the
you.
picture. You should show the picture on your social media of when we drove back into Canada, into White Rock, and we had taken a selfie of the two of us on against the water, and I think it said something like "we survived" or something.
I
It
know the
was a
picture. I don't know where it is. I'll see if I can
yeah.
find it. Yeah. See, what I find weird from my perspective and my wounding is at that moment you're talking about, I felt
Mhm.
connected and close to you. Yet, there was many times where I was like, get the fuck away from me.
Right.
And that was not, I can reflect, that was not you. You didn't do anything, air quotes, wrong. That was my internal reaction to whatever was going on, which was never anything crazy. Like, one thing that irked me, and I caught myself doing this a year ago. You were kind of the navigator and I was driving, and we rolled into a couple different cities and we didn't really know where we were going. For
Mhm.
whatever reason, that shit just drives me crazy. And I hate it. I overreacted, number one. I would and number two, it was directed at you versus my frustration, which was probably like I feel lost or I feel out of control or whatever it might be. But pretty crazy how we can act towards people when it's not air quotes deserved. Doing a lot of air quotes today. So
It's all good. Well, and it's like you were saying earlier around the whole child parent relationship is I feel like we do that a lot with the people that we feel the most safe with,
yeah,
right? And I
totally.
do think that we felt safe with each other, and that allowed us to lash out in unhealthy ways um, on both sides at times because what we need though I think is a safe sounding board, and I don't know that we were able to give that to each other in those moments.
No.
Not a sounding board, but a safe, like soft place to land, right?
Yeah, soft place to land is a term you used to use all the time. And again, at the time, I
Hmm.
had no fucking clue what you meant. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because you introduced me to this work. I'm only here today because of my relationship with you. I didn't know who Mark
Right.
Rose was or Evolving Man, who I now know personally, or Rising Woman Shalina, who I know personally.
Hmm.
And you exposed me to some of these ideas of relationships and just humanness that I'd never heard of before. So that gift, there is no price that there's no dollar value that can equate to. It was like, for me, the first conscious relationship I had, or the closest thing to it up to that point. Probably for you too, I would imagine, but I'm not sure.
Say that again. It was the closest.
To a conscious relationship where we were kind of sort of aware, kind of sort of talked about the issues.
Absolutely. You were the first real experience I had with a man who was willing to engage emotionally, regardless of how, you know, how explosive it was at times. But you engaged, which was and you wanted to communicate and work through things. I think that was a new experience for me at the time for sure.
Yeah. What would you say to people listening that want that from their partner but aren't getting it?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned over these past 8 years is around boundaries and what I will and will not accept in terms of not only treatment, in terms of another person's energy or um, words, treatment, behaviors. I needed to learn my own level of um, emotional regulation, and to know that the the experiences that were being brought up, or the emotional experience that was happening within me, it they were causing me to experience a lot of wounding, right? My own wounding inside, whether it was my worthiness wound or my um you know my need to be heard and seen and validated. And when I wasn't receiving those things, I internalized that and further thought that, okay, well, it's me. I'm not worthy of a healthy relationship or being seen or being with somebody who is able to manage their emotions in a healthy way, right? And it wasn't until I learned about boundaries, and what that means and how it can actually support me, um, that I've really started to grow myself as an individual and cultivate the kind of relationship that I want to have. So I would say to anybody else navigating relationships where they're not feeling seen, heard, or understood, or their partner isn't engaging in the way that they want, it's boundaries, and to learn to cultivate their own level of empathy as well. Because when we see the other person as an enemy,
Mm.
it makes it really hard for oneself to show up in the way that you need to show up to navigate that relationship. And I'm not saying that we should, put up with abuse, because I'm never saying that, but to understand where that behavior is coming from, it's coming from somebody who is wounded, and it's coming from somebody who has gone through a range of experiences in their lives that have shaped how they're showing up today. So being able to cultivate empathy and then work on your own boundaries would be pretty a good starting point.
Yeah, you said a couple really interesting things. One is like something about them being the enemy. And, I've experienced where they're the person closest to you and then they're the enemy, and then they're closest to you and then they're the enemy. And that is hard on both parties.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I learned is how to repair quickly.
Mm.
Meaning,
Rep-
oh my God, I never even knew what that meant. I never even knew what that looked like. I didn't understand.
mm-hmm.
And I had a somatic therapist who changed my life and said human relationships are breaking connection and reconnecting. And it just blew my mind,
Right. Yeah.
because my experience of like person I trust, person I love to enemy, the connection's broken at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody had shown me how to like reconnect it. I would just like go up the next day. It's like, hey, how's it going? Nothing was, there was a damage done to the relationship, and it needs to be repaired. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It can be a I'm sorry for my behavior and a hug.
Yeah, I didn't act the way I wanted to act.
Something very, very simple, but I didn't know that at the time. You said something else, and now it slipped my mind what I was going to riff on.
You had said something as well that triggered a thought, but it's not coming back to me now.
I think, for me, it had to happen. Like I needed it, and it was the right time. I'm sure you probably feel the same. As unfortunate as it is that things end sometimes, my whole view on, post divorce and, touching 40 dating is it's not what people think it is. And it's actually kind of fucking hard,
Yeah.
because we've got all this baggage, so to speak, that we need to figure out. I believe, especially at that age. It's not like you're in a relationship, you've been married for 20 years, you grow together. It's like, here you go. I'm going to drop you off at the train station with like more luggage than you can carry. And you want to get on the relationship train, but like, how the hell do you do that when you got all this stuff and you only got two hands to get on it? I love this analogy. I just made it up on the fly.
That's where, but there's an assumption there that when you're younger and you get into relationship with someone, that you grow together. Air quotes. See, now it's infectious, because sometimes people in younger relationships don't grow
Fair.
together, which is
Very fair.
why we part, which is
Yes.
why my marriage ended. And but I will agree that there is a lot of baggage that we bring at any point in a union, I would say, right? I brought baggage to my
Yeah, you're
marriage,
right.
my
No, you're
first
right.
relationship.
I'm just
It
really obviously
Yeah.
reflecting where I'm at. This is a very fascinating experience.
Mm.
I'm I am single as we record this, and I'm okay with it, which is probably the first time I can say that like from my heart. I
Mhm.
think it's the first time I can say like, without the little boy in me screaming, "Oh, this is no good." I'm like, huh, "It's all good, buddy.
Yeah,
We're okay."
that's
Because
powerful. That's
it,
huge growth.
yeah, and it doesn't. It's very experiential. It's very challenging to put it into words of where I was and where I am. But every relationship I've had has played a part in this, but because of the length of it, the timing, kind of the depth and the level of consciousness in it, ours played a massive, massive role in who I am today. I think about that, I need the little boy Brandon, or sorry,
Mm,
I need the man Brandon, not the boy Brandon. That
right.
is burned in me. And it's not in a hurtful way. It's like, that was like from her heart. And like I said before, it didn't make a lot of sense at the time. And now I'm like, that was a massive, massive pivot point. It's a pivot point because I heard a term a while ago, or I don't remember where, it's irrelevant, is we desire to grow long before we have the capacity and the tools to grow.
Mm,
And I was definitely in a space in the time of our relationship. It's like, don't want to do this. I don't want to behave this way, but no clue how to get out of that loop.
interesting. What's coming up for me right now as we talk about that statement that I made around needing you to be a man and not I need not the little boy Brandon though, is I'm thinking of a reframe and I'm thinking about how we need to create relationship containers where both partners can hold space for both the adult and child version of themselves, right? I really think that
I don't
because we can't
disagree
ever
with you.
say, yeah,
I don't disagree with you on that. But what I will say from where I was coming from and the men I've worked with, and we, many, and women too, but I'm speaking, we're stuck at 12-year-old version emotionally. Like,
there are a lot of us who
never
are
mind
stuck.
emotionally intelligent. I've learned that's one thing. Emotional maturity is a completely different ball game. Because even back then, I had a little bit of lingo. That doesn't mean shit if you can't put it into your life and show up and practice it, in my
To some
opinion.
degree, yeah, to some degree.
Okay, watching the clock. I've got 2 questions for you. What message do you have for you during our relationship?
I think that the message I have for myself is the message I have for other people navigating these types of relationships, which was to stop and breathe and um, and approach the certain situations that we navigated together with more empathy first. Because I felt very one of my default modes is to and for a lot of people as well is to become a brick wall, right, is to get very harsh and to put up a protective barrier, which is what I was doing. I was putting up a protective emotional barrier to um, that wasn't serving myself and it wasn't serving you either in certain moments. I can't remember how often I did this, but I think something that I've been learning uh, and practicing as I continue to move through new relationship is to soften. And that is a mantra
Mm,
I have for myself right now is that I don't need I'm okay. I will be okay. And my little Sue is okay. And so you don't need to like put up a fight. I think that would be a piece of advice would have given myself back then and then to obviously learn about boundaries.
what message do you have for Brandon 8 years ago?
That's a little harder. Maybe it would be to find to just take care of that little Brandon, right? To hold space for little Brandon and um and ask himself, what is what does my little guy need right now?
Mhm.
And how can I resource that kid who's feeling scared and either backed against a corner or feeling like he needs to lash out? What does he need and how can adult Brandon or big Brandon support that?
That's fantastic. I think that's exactly what he needed to hear. Wouldn't have made much sense, but
Yes.
Thank you for saying yes to this.
Thank you for inviting me on. It was a fun adventure.
Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.